What is up, everybody? Solomon here. Super excited to be with Genfinity, interviewing a multitude of builders across Web3. Super excited today to be diving deep into the weeds with Hedera DeFi, which is powered by Chainlink and Bonzo Finance. We have leaders from Chainlink, Bonzo, HBAR Foundation, exploring industry collaboration, the future of DeFi and the HBAR network. We do have, a special guest here with us from Chainlink, and I always like to start these out with an intro since we have a new guest. We have Will Riley, who's head of Web3 sales within the Chainlink ecosystem. Will, if you could kick us off with an intro of yourself and your role within Chainlink, that'd be great.
Yeah, of course. And thank you for the intro. So, obviously, William Riley, I've been at Chainlink roughly 4.5 years. I've been in the crypto space around 8. Um, my time at Chainlink has encompassed a number of different things, from working with data providers, node operators, as well as hands-on with centralized finance players that do crypto related things. You can think like exchanges or asset issuers. And now, most recently, I head up our core Web3 team, and we engage the broad sector of Web3 as a whole in DeFi, roughly encompassing 2,000 plus users, a multitude of chains, including our fine friends over at Bonzo as well as Hedera. So lovely to be here and excited for today's conversation.
I'm going to go round robin with brief intros because we never know new community that might be watching. So, Charles, CEO, HBAR Foundation, can you give us an intro of yourself and just talk a little bit about what you do within the foundation?
Yeah, so Charles, CEO at the HBAR Foundation. Essentially, what we're here to do is empower founders or other teams that are wanting to build new businesses and build economies on the Hedera network. So everything from, just we're kind of the entry point to the network. If you want to come to us, we can talk about how we work through the process of grants, technical integration, linking you up with partners, some of the best ways to get integrated with the community and, grow your business. So our focus especially is really finding those founders that have great ideas that they want to build on the Hedera network and just really kind of supercharging that process.
Awesome. Thank you, Charles. And then Brady. I have to preface, Brady, it's great to see you. I've done a bunch of interviews with Brady in coffee shops. Brady, great to see you not in a coffee shop. Love an intro of yourself today.
Not in a coffee shop today. I'm at home with the blue background. So my name is Brady Gentile. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Bonzo Finance Labs. I've actually been in the Hedera ecosystem for quite a while now. I was working at Hedera and the Hashgraph organization for about 5.5 years. The beginning of last year, saw a gap in the DeFi ecosystem, and all of the economic and technical pieces were there to be able to bring lending and borrowing initially online into Hedera. So, our team has essentially taken Aave, which is the battle-tested, both economically and technically, code base for lending protocol that's one of the most popular across Web3, adapted it to Hedera, and we launched that with supply functionality in November of last year, and then enabled borrowing functionality. And now we're continuing on our path to become what we're describing as the liquidity layer of Hedera, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit later in the interview.
For sure. I kind of want to kick it off here because there's kind of a long-standing relationship between the Chainlink and Hedera ecosystems. And I guess I'll ask you, Charles, given Chainlink Labs is a Hedera council member and you're obviously president of Hedera, it'd be great to hear from you just some perspective as far as what it means for Chainlink to be, sitting on the Hedera council.
Yeah, I mean, having Chainlink really early into the Hedera council was a really big deal. That was kind of a huge milestone. It was the first Web3, centric company to actually join the council in kind of a sea of very well-known enterprises. So this was kind of a really interesting point in having a Web3 and crypto company join the governing council. It made a lot of people uncomfortable, which was good. And then they quickly learned like, hey, there's a lot of stuff we can learn from this group. And, so it really started to signal something a lot more powerful. So, Chainlink being obviously a huge provider of all decentralized infrastructure, our governing council started to recognize that it's fairly institutional grade, improving every day. And, for them being council members, it means that they actually have a real voice in the direction of our network too. So from technical, strategic, and an economic standpoint, it's good to have their voice in the room. And now as a governing council member, and that's kind of what governing council membership means, is those members get to shape the roadmap on how we work in the future. So it's not really just a title, it's a real seat at the table to help get long-term alignment with Hedera. And on our side, it helps us really deepen the technical integration between our two ecosystems, and we can do that collaboration in a really intentional way that isn't just by accident. So it was a really big deal early on, and that relationship is improving and growing, every day. So we're excited.
Will, I would love your thoughts on it as well.
Yeah, thank you. So like Charles mentioned, we've been a long-standing member of the council. I believe we joined around May 2021. Us at Chainlink, we consider this a great honor and responsibility to be, one of the stewards and participants in the direction of the Hedera ecosystem. I mean, really, this is a star-studded council to be a part of. We've got tech giants, ESGs, physical hardware players, tokenized asset issuers, banks. I mean, these aren't just your average crypto Joes participating in this council. I mean, it's very diverse, and we are unified in our mission to make Hedera a better ecosystem. However, it's fully remains and has that ethos of decentralization at the governance level fully intact. And I think that's what's really, really valuable here. In terms of our participation, I've had the fortune of sitting in on some of these, meetings in the past. And for Chainlink, our goal and our foundational principle is rooted in security and cryptographic truth in everything that we do. So this is where we really try to take, inject our firm opinions here and ensuring that Hedera is moving forward in a very secure and highly reliable way. And in this is regards for DeFi adoption, such as the folks over at Bonzo, as well as TradFi players alike. So really a great honor and super excited to be one of these standing members.
Awesome. I think we've seen a lot of kind of like evolution of these networks too. And Charles, I guess I would love if you could touch base on this. I mean, Hedera historically positioned as kind of an enterprise ecosystem, but rapidly obviously expanding into DeFi retail driven use cases. What does the retail landscape kind of look like today? And there's been a lot of recent milestones as well. And where do you kind of see it heading in the future?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really, really exciting time for us. I mean, I think a lot of people have seen Q1, especially kind of the increase in activity on our retail side, whether it's, USDC or TVL or whatever it may be, getting more ERC equivalency. I mean, these are the things that we've been working on really hard in the first quarter. Hedera has always been known as, a network that has huge throughput, predictable low fees, obviously very ideal for enterprise that needs to kind of do financial models with, predictability. Now, a lot of those traits are proving really attractive for DeFi and consumer use cases as well. So like obviously Bonzo here and Bonzo integrating with Chainlink has been massive. And it's being built with real sustainability in mind, not just, short-term hype, which I mean, we love and we appreciate. So I think, we'll see DeFi on Hedera really blend a little bit more into the mainstream consumer experiences. So you'll see more tokenized loyalty, a lot of the real world asset tokenization coming on, financial access tools. And then obviously with Chainlink, this is all going to have a composable infrastructure, better trust guarantees behind it. And, really this just happens to be a case where even though we have that enterprise and institutional grade technology behind us, it works really well for consumers too. And that's kind of how it should be. Like, why shouldn't a consumer be able to have that level of technology in their own hand? And that's what we're really excited about, moving that direction.
Awesome. Yeah. And William, I would love to ask you, given the existing synergies, and we'll get into the Chainlink scale program here as well, I'm sure. How do you envision Chainlink enabling retail ecosystem growth on Hedera?
Yeah, great question. And so from my perspective, retail experience, is ultimately interfaced with the likes of a player like Bonzo, right? So that's where the retail experience is really rooted at. But in terms of what Bonzo has to build and deliver for this retail experience is their developer experience. Exactly what tools are they using? How reliable are they? How familiar are they? And this is where we really pride ourselves at Chainlink as being the #1 option in market, not only from security, but as well as developer experience, ease of integration, as well as peace of mind of what you're getting. Chainlink's battle-tested infrastructure has delivered over $20 trillion worth of value executed across its Oracle networks. We've delivered 16 billion data points to chain. And this is all consumed by, thousands upon thousands of developers in the ecosystem because they can truly trust it and, be comfortable with what they're building. With Brady and the Bonzo team, if they're using a service that they are staying awake up at night, wondering if it will fail on them, this really hampers their ability to go to market with a large retail adoption. With Chainlink, ideally, Brady is getting lots of sleep, or at least not losing any because of his
He's not.
engagements with Chainlink. So,
Brady
and in
doesn't
terms
sleep.
of, yeah, right. Who sleeps in
Yeah.
crypto anyway? But in terms of Chainlink Scale program, just focusing on this topic for a brief moment, we're very excited to be partners with Hedera as they're adopting the Chainlink Scale program. This ultimately allows for bootstrapping the Oracle network and infrastructure that goes onto a blockchain such as Hedera, and allowing folks like Bonzo really quick and easy access to this with low barriers of friction. So really excited to have Hedera a part of the Chainlink Scale program. And, this is just the very beginning of a very long relationship. So
I would love, Charles, and I think I'm sure everybody can probably agree up here. We've seen kind of like a maturity aspect within, especially some of these networks. And Charles, I guess from your stance, I would love if you could touch base just on the future of collaboration in this industry and where you particularly see maybe promising areas between Chainlink and Hedera kind of interacting in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super bullish on collaboration. Early crypto, it was all about being a maxi cutthroat competition. Now we're starting to see that a lot of the real value is coming from that composability and teams and different technology working together. And so, Chainlink and Hedera is kind of that perfect example where, Chainlink brings fully trusted data and interoperability, which is huge. On the Hedera side, we bring sustainable, predictable performance, ABFT security, really unique governance model, which actually is highly respected in the industry, and in traditional industries, they really like that we have a strong governance model. So, together we can really start picking away at those high integrity use cases. So traditional financial institutions, they love using people like Chainlink and Hedera. RWAs that really need precise price feeds and decentralized trust at the same time, that can only be done with us working together. So, the future isn't really one chain, one protocol, maxis everywhere. It is going to be cross-chain, interoperable, and very collaborative. Hedera and Chainlink, I really believe can be at the center of most of that. So, collaboration is something I'm super bullish on, and I think we need to see a lot more of it in the industry.
Well, Brady, I know, we talk about kind of like, critical kind of infrastructure to kind of propel out these ecosystems forward. And I would love if you could maybe just give us an overview of what Bonzo Finance does, how Bonzo is contributing to Hedera's expansion in kind of the Web3 retail space, and maybe even beyond, because I know you have some interesting viewpoints as, traditional entities come on board. So.
Yeah, no doubt. I want to add to what Charles had mentioned also. All of these tools are being given to builders and developers to be able to paint the vision that Charles just described. Today, we're far away from that vision of interoperability being just ubiquitous across the entire space. And I do think that it's up to us to take what's being given in terms of infrastructure, and especially infrastructure that's enterprise grade and very robust, and start to build applications in a way where a lot of that complexity and workflows are obfuscated for the end user to make it just a completely seamless experience. And so a lot of what we're doing and the way that we're thinking is, it is about cross-chain and recognizing the importance of that. but it's also about automating the workflows that are taking place by users and making that as seamless as possible and obfuscating all of this complexity that users experience today. So that's kind of the lens that we're strategically thinking through as we kind of evolve as a product. And as a product, to dive into what we're helping contribute to the development of, is Bonzo is starting as a lending protocol. So we're based on Aave v2. Aave was chosen just because it's been battle tested across the industry economically and technically. With minimal modifications, I think trying to keep everything as intact as possible is really important, just to ensure the integrity and the security of the protocol. Lending inherently is just incredibly risky, which is why, for Chainlink, for example, all the third-party infrastructure that we're using, it's really important that we're using infrastructure that's incredibly robust. Oracles for a lending protocol are so critical to its operations, where if you have an Oracle that price feed that shuts down or is delayed or has issues, that's going to cause potentially catastrophic issues for all of the users that are utilizing the protocol and have active positions for lending and borrowing. And so I do get better sleep knowing that this is on Hedera and on Chainlink. What we're offering is a lending protocol, like I said, based on Aave. Users can take out over collateralized loans, so essentially supplying any supported asset as collateral into the protocol. You can just supply and earn interest on what you've supplied, or you can use that value supplied to borrow other assets that are supported by the protocol. So every supported asset is effectively interoperable in this way. And we're seeing a ton of usage. So, at launch, we were, I think, the fastest growing DeFi protocol on Hedera. We're now ranked number 2, right behind SaucerSwap. And we're seeing about 33 million in liquidity, with about 30% of that being actively borrowed. We're starting with lending, but going back to the concept of thinking through this strategic lens of workflow automation and reducing complexity, we're on a path to become the liquidity layer of Hedera, which means we want to ensure that not only do we have a large aggregation of liquidity for this lending layer, which allows for other DeFi protocols to come online that offer different, more advanced functionality that use this layer, but also expanding the offering into other products, such as bridging using Layer 0 and Axelar within the Bonzo interface, and then also a vaults functionality, which is going to allow people to be able to utilize automated strategies that don't just touch the lending side, but also actually route liquidity out to other DeFi protocols across the ecosystem. And these vaults actually are going to automate a lot of the operational complexity of managing liquidity. And then with the bridging component, being able to seamlessly supply liquidity from other networks into these vaults and, again, route it into other places in the ecosystem. So that's kind of the grand vision of what we're thinking right now. Obviously, a big core focus is ensuring that lending is online, working. We're adding more assets and supporting Hedera and its economy in that way. But very excited about the future in the next year.
I kind of want to open it up a little bit too, because you mentioned something that I think is like super interesting when we talk about like mass adoption of the technology. You basically mentioned, abstracting away complexities for user experience and all the things that opens up. So in that kind of vein, you obviously have to nail the infrastructure. Like the infrastructure has to be in place to be able to make things simpler. I guess the question I kind of want to ask is, from your standpoint, Brady, how Bonzo is, I think you guys were the first to leverage Chainlink price feeds on Hedera. How you guys are leveraging Chainlink infrastructure to enable to like scale securely. So kind of in the vein of what you were talking about before, and how this is going to just impact Hedera network adoption as a whole.
Yeah. So I think, to your point about automating workflows and scalability, if you look across the entire tech industry, not just in Web3, there's large enterprise organizations that are literally became as big as they are because they were able to automate workflows for people. And when you look across Web3, that's probably one of the biggest problems that exists in the space, is like everything is so incredibly manual, and there's so many different touch points that people have. And if you can start to compress this down into a more seamless workflow for the end user, reduce complexity, increase the value that they're getting out of the product, I think that's a great focus area, for whatever it is that you're doing or building in the space. And I think with Chainlink, they're providing a suite of tools that are going to enable a lot of this workflow automation. We're excited to explore, cross-chain interoperability that they have, which came online recently. And then from a price feeds perspective, as we expand and scale, there's going to need to be support for assets from other networks that are living in Hedera. So, as we continue to expand, being able to utilize more and more of what Chainlink's offering, and being able to do so in a way that's very reliable and trustworthy is super important. And from a price feed perspective specifically, that's going to be a critical thing in terms of like increasing liquidity. Like direct impact is like more liquidity on the Hedera network and more blue chip assets on the Hedera network, and things for people to do.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I kind of want to open it up to all three of you gentlemen up here. And we have seen, I've said this before in so many of these podcasts, like it seems like over the past 6 to 9 months, we've seen more announcements of real world adoption than we've seen, and since 2009 to 2024, just in general, probably cumulative. So I guess, this is for all three of you guys. What do you see as the biggest drivers of real world adoption today? What trends are paving the way for a future where blockchain is seamlessly integrated into our daily lives? I know that's a really low hanging fruit question. I'll start with Will here.
Sure. Yeah. So at least from my perspective, I think some of the things that are key to actually getting this type of adoption is, it really boils down to reduction of frictional points. So first, reducing friction of the actual transactions themselves. Additionally, tapping into liquidity that was previously unconnected. I think this was what Brady was kind of referring to, and looking at what we're doing at CCIP and being connected to about 4 dozen chains today, ultimately allows all of this liquidity to be unified and tapped into across various ecosystems. And another important thing is just ultimately lowering the barrier of entry for market participants. This is where user experience comes into. A lot of folks are looking for a phenomenal user experience. They are less interested in kind of the tech behind it. They just don't want to have any type of risks or failures within that experience. And and I think that's what we really pride ourselves on, is ensuring that again, the folks that are using Chainlink infra, they don't have to worry about that aspect. And then the folks over at Hedera, they're providing a high performant blockchain. This also improves user experience. And then lastly, Bonzo is built on top of both, and ultimately allows them to provide that UX that allows for a wider set adoption. So I think these are the important factors here.
Brady or Charles, whoever wants to take what's kind of driving real world adoption, at least in your guys' stance, whether it's in network specific or just kind of broader, or maybe tied into both. Charles, maybe we'll go with you first.
Yeah. I mean, Brady kind of hit the nail on the head. The trust, simplicity, and utility. Really, for a DLT, a blockchain, to be part of everyday life, it really does have to be invisible, frictionless, really trustworthy, useful. That's where these infrastructures like Hedera and Chainlink become really critical. We try to enable the real world use cases that have clear benefits. So faster settlement, verifiable data, tokenization and reporting, and then consumer apps that have a really seamless UX. That's where people like Brady and other builders come into play. Is how do you build the experience for the user? And again, Brady hit it. The one of the biggest drivers to velocity is trusted automation. And once you have data flows that go from physical world to digital world that have guarantees, and then smart contracts execute with that level of confidence, that's really where the flywheel starts to spin. And a lot of people know I think back to technology very historically, and going from like TCP/IP to www was 10 years. And like, then after that, I mean, yes, everybody had the internet, but it was still another 4 years until Bank of America put a payment portal online. And it's like those, obviously with this technology, we have a much higher velocity. And it seems like it's going a lot faster because we're able to talk about it in real time and share information. But in reality, I mean, we are just at those stages where, you know, we've now got use cases that are becoming more automated, more easier for users to have. And now these institutions are starting to trust the technology, and we're hitting that quote unquote Bank of America moment where it's like, who's going to be the first big institution to take this thing global? And like, it's coming to that point. So I think, you know, the flywheel is in motion and we're getting there, but it is that trusted automation, making it really easy for consumers to use. And then the other thing that drives a ton of this stuff is just ubiquitous computing. I mean, when you have IoT devices, 5G moving into 6G, you've got all kinds of AI integrating with everything. You have to have verified, trusted data. And then you'll always have to have your, what I call your proof of humanity. You're going to have to be able to prove who you are in the future moving forward. And that's going to be a really important thing.
I think just as a quick sidebar, like I forget who I was interviewing, but I think it was one of the like the ex-chief architect of like Coca-Cola, and he was talking about kind of the inception of the internet. And I think it was Pizza Hut, if I'm not mistaken, that like kind of had like one of the first mailing lists. I don't know if it was in the
that was me. I always use that. Yeah, I always use that analogy. It was, yeah, Pizza Hut launched a website. You couldn't do anything. It basically just collected email addresses for 4 years. And then Bank of America started an online payment portal, I believe in 96. And then guess who's the only pizza company with 300,000 email addresses? And it's Pizza Hut.
I'll have to make sure I give you a shout out every time because I've referenced that like 2 or 3 times, and I'm like, I forget who, so I know who it is.
Yeah, and but that's the thing. It's, you know, getting some of these large companies to just start, I mean, get in the tech. I mean, now we have a lot of companies that are kind of playing in the sandbox, but learning, testing it out, that's kind of one of the superpowers of the governing council is, you know, we have these meetings, everybody gets to play around with those sandbox ideas and where can you safely play? And then you start integrating things like Chainlink, like Bonzo, and like these things can actually be used in a lot of these businesses to save on cost, to generate even net new revenue, which obviously is a CFO's favorite 3 words. So yeah, we try to do what we can.
Brady, I would love maybe just briefly if you could, because it's probably an expansion of what you were going into before, but what do you think right now, I mean, are the biggest kinds of trends that we're seeing for real world adoption and throughout this space?
Yeah, I think to play off Charles's point, I've always said I would be terrified to live in a world where both AI and blockchain aren't evolving at the same time. Because with AI, we do need some layer of trust, semblance of trust, proof of human. It's going to be a crazy world in the next, 5 to 10 years, just with how fast AI is advancing, especially generative AI. And I think in general, like in terms of mainstream adoption, this is the largest industry that tech has ever tried to disrupt in terms of how like capital backed it is, how entrenched in regulation it is. In the past, disruption across tech, it's been things like e-commerce or media. This is like the biggest industry that tech has tried to tackle. And so I think that in itself warrants that it's going to take a really long time for this transformation to take place, longer than we've seen historically. And typically what you see with emerging tech is everything starts to look like a toy at first. So, today we've got sushi tokens and dog pictures and like all of these various assets and things that are just, they look really silly, especially for someone from like an outsider perspective and reading news reports and seeing this stuff. It looks silly. But at the end of the day, I think, especially from like a technologist perspective, all of the underlying tech beneath that and those sort of potentially silly looking assets is really incredible. It's really powerful. For us, for lending and borrowing, I've learned so much about how Aave works, for example, how over collateralized loans work, how these decentralized finance tools and transactions work in this trustless, automated way. And it's really incredible, powerful tech. And today we're using a lot of this stuff, this underlying tech, with assets that as an industry we've created and we've sort of applied value to. But over time, you can use a lot of the same underlying tech, especially as it matures and evolves, with real assets. And we are starting to see sort of the beginnings of that today. And then, my question as time goes on is always like, is this disruptive nature for this industry going to match the disruptive nature that we've seen in past industries that tech has like gone after, where the question is it augmentative to the incumbent, or is it supplanting what it is that they've built? And I go back and forth all the time on this. Ultimately, I do think that business models that are built foundationally with Web3 in mind, so like homegrown Web3 native protocols, are ultimately going to be able to extract the largest amount of value from the technology and be able to pass that value on to end users and do so in a more efficient, cost-effective way. And so I'm curious to see how incumbents revolutionize their business, cannibalize their businesses to adapt to this new world that's coming, and also new players that are entering the market that are actually going to be a threat to incumbents and push them even further as they start to eat their lunch to like, hey, we really have to figure this out. So yeah, next like 10, 20 years is going to be super interesting. The lowest hanging fruit, I'd say, in terms of mainstream use cases that I've seen from like a technical perspective, a regulatory perspective, and like an end user perspective is obviously like payments and stable coins. I think is just something that everybody's tackling really quickly from all of those different perspectives. So excited to see that kind of come to fruition and see stablecoin payments come online and all the flexibility and value that offers. And yeah.
Awesome. I wanted to ask you, Brady, because you guys have done such a good job at educating, the community on, aspects of DeFi or aspects of what Bonzo's doing. What's the best way for people to educate themselves on what you guys are building? How can the community get involved and contribute to Bonzo and Hedera's ecosystem growth?
Yeah, education's a huge part of sort of our overarching mission. So, this functionality is brand new to all of the users across Hedera, whether they're retail users or institutional users. For example, when decentralized exchanges first came online a few years ago for Hedera, there was so much education that was done by Saucer Swap and other teams. And it was super important to front load a lot of that to get people as educated as possible, to answer as many questions as possible, because that pays dividends long term. It ends up being your community educating other users outside of the core group, and that just grows and grows over time. The documentation for the website, so docs.bonzo.finance, is a great starting point. There's a lot of educational resources there with regards to how to get started, how things work functionally, the risk frameworks, which includes a lot of information actually about Chainlink and the price feeds and oracles. And then honestly, playing with these technologies is the absolute best way to learn. So jumping in and just trying it out, understanding how it works, basically learning by playing across the entire, like any emerging tech is going to be the most valuable thing anyone can do, and just staying very curious about how everything works and new things that are being introduced to the ecosystem and to new products that are launching.
Awesome. Thank you, Brady. I'm going to ask you guys the standard question I always ask as we ramp this down. Forward-looking statements. What excites you guys most about the future of this space? Whether it's, and I know that you guys have both ecosystems have had so many milestones. So if you want to go down the rabbit hole, fine. If not, just kind of forward-looking statements and what excites you about the future of this space or within your ecosystems. And I'll start with Will.
Yeah, sure. I mean, ultimately super excited excited for a number of things. Equally excited, as Brady pointed out, on stable coins. I think with a lot of the potential changes and changing environments with the regulatory landscape is extremely interesting and exciting. I think it's going to really open up a new wave of innovation and adoption, specifically in the North Americas region. Personally, I'm really excited about BTC Fi. It's a bunch of untapped liquidity that's sitting over in the Bitcoin ecosystem that is really looking for a new home to make use of this value. And in general, I also am pretty excited about AI agents and commingling with blockchains. We have a number of interesting use cases with Chainlink and AI, specifically. Last year we performed, work with Euroclear and Swift and UBS on, aggregating corporate actions data via LLMs and providing accurate outcomes of those data sets, essentially solving the hallucination problem that comes with some of these LLM usage and providing an Oracle output to chain. So really excited to see these types of things kind of come to fruition and mature. And I think it's just going to really open up the floodgates for, mass adoption as a whole.
Awesome. Charles, I'm going to move to you for forward-looking statements. What excites you about the future of this space?
Yeah, about 7-8 years ago, there was a saying that was, what's the best use case for blockchain and crypto? The first best use case is speculation, and we're still looking for the second. And I'm really happy to say we've completely surpassed that. And, now the foundation is being laid really for blockchains and DLTs to be the trust layer of the internet. Individuals can own their own data. Assets can move freely with transparency and security. Systems can really coordinate with each other in a much easier way. The good thing is Hedera has always been built for that future. Manson Lehman had that foresight decades ago, well, more than a decade ago. And now it just feels like a lot of the rest of the world is catching up. So seeing that alignment happen, it's happening in policy, it's happening in enterprise. The consumer behavior is starting to turn, the velocity of decentralized applications joining the network. All of that's really starting to come to fruition. And the original vision of what Hedera was built for and those solutions are starting to happen. So, that's what gets me up in the morning, is that it took a long time to get here, but I can tell you the use cases are expanding rapidly, and that velocity is only increasing.
Brady, we're going to close down here with you. So forward-looking statements, what excites you about the future of this space, Bonzo expansion, wherever you want to take it?
Yeah, I think, Bonzo expansion ties into expansion of the Hedera economy. And it's been so exciting to see all of the updates and changes and the urgency, I think, out of these leading organizations within the Hedera economy, like HBAR Foundation, just driving the ecosystem towards the right direction. Like one of the biggest ones for us is, as a lending protocol, we're so reliant on stablecoin liquidity. If you look across any lending protocol across Web3, stablecoin liquidity is definitely one of the most utilized assets, just because it opens the door for a lending protocol to perform so many different types of advanced functionalities. It's also the most sort of borrowed asset, and its stable nature enables a lot of flexibility for a lending protocol. And so, we saw Crypto.com and Binance support for Hedera native USDC recently, which was just such a huge impact and a quick win. And we've got bridging coming online very soon with Axelar and Layer 0. And, all of these like core pieces of critical infrastructure that allow builders to create incredible experiences for end users is what excites me most. And the whole ecosystem is just moving at such a rapid pace. And when we're given access to these tools and infrastructure, it just opens the door to these new variables for all the different types of things that we can build and automate and make available. And that's inclusive of a big part being liquidity. And that, continuing to increase, and I think that's going to continue to increase even further as the year goes on. So that's what I'm most excited about.
Well, I definitely, before we hop here, wanted to mention, and again, Brady, you guys do such a good job at kind of educational aspects. You can go to bonzo.finance to learn more about what Brady and the team are building, and kind of DeFi on Hedera, and the documentation section, as Brady mentioned. At Bonzo_finance on X. Definitely check out Chainlink's Twitter feed. I'm sure most people are following at Chainlink. Or go to chain.link. And wanted to give a huge shout out to Zepsi and the whole HBAR Foundation team for allowing us the opportunity to do a podcast like this. Definitely check out the HBAR Foundation at HBAR_foundation. And then not Wi-Fi, or hbarfoundation.org. That being said, guys, really, really appreciate your time today. Hang out with me here for a second as I ramp this down to make sure that I get the recording. And nice meeting you, Will.
Yeah, nice to meet you guys as well.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, guys.